There's a world out there, it's a digital maze where dollars move in mysterious ways. Complex systems, rules, and regulations. The payments professor sparks revelations. No need to fear the Fed now.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Payments Podium. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about the ICBA. Now, I know when it comes to the payments industry, there's a lot of different agencies with, that just go by letters. So we've got a lot to learn. And to help us learn today, we have Kari Mitchum from the ICBA. Kari, please say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Well, I'm so glad to have you here. I got to say, it's really a pleasure because I know we've had a couple of great conversations lately about what's happening in the industry and how to keep up with things in the industry. And I know that that's something the ICBA can really do and assist with. But before we get to that, the one question I ask everybody who comes on the Payments Podium is, how in the world did you end up in electronic payments? Because I know not many of us ever actually go, they played Cowboys and Indians, and I played electronic banker. It's not a common thing, right? I do know one person who did, but most of us is like, I got here by accident. I needed a job, something like that. So how did you end up in electronic payments?
I might be your second person. When I was growing up, my dad was in municipal finance. And so I grew up being exposed to, how the city takes in money and then how it puts money out. And so, as the money was, as the taxes were collected, and then it, financed the roads and the schools and the museums. And he was at a city that had, at one point in time defaulted on some bonds. And, it was very important to make sure the city workers were getting paid. So I remember it was just your life in your kitchen conversation about money moving and how the money was moving to get things done. And I even kind of remember, because this was a long, long time ago, when the city switched to direct deposit to get the employees to get their money to make sure that, as Friday payday came out, you got your paycheck. So, kind of from that, I went into my undergraduate in college was in political science and business. So even when I was, living in Virginia at that time and doing your Hill internships, which is what poli-sci majors do, I was always on banking and finance issues. So I always figured I would do government finance, helping the government move money to where it needed to go. So my first job out of college was actually at ICBA, where I'm at now again. And so ICBA is a trade association. So as a poli-sci major, I was all excited because this is your First Amendment. It's your right to assemble, and then it's your right to petition the government. So I was sort of like, oh my gosh, we've got moving money and we've got assembly. So it kind of hit both my majors. And then, after I was at ICBA for a while, I needed to grow and do more things. So, from there, I went to a large network. So I was doing payments at a large network. And then I was at other trade associations and then a larger financial institutions. So I kind of made my way back to ICBA, starting off at small community institutions and seeing how money moves things locally. It goes back to my childhood. Like that's what my household dinner conversation was about is, how the money was getting things done. And
so you're telling me that as a kid, you sat around the dinner table talking about ACH and everybody knew what it meant.
Bonds. We talked more about bond ratings. I was probably the only fourth grader who knew what Moody's was and knew what bond ratings were. So like at a big picture and not about money moving, but yeah, actually a little bit because computers were starting to move in. So, dad would come home and talk about that. And it was a city, so it was also the local news. So if something happened, I don't want to say everyone knew who my dad was, and even the other people who were helping the city hit their finances. So I was always well aware that you had to move money to get things done.
That is so cool. Yeah, you probably win an award for it because that's not a common answer. Not at all. I mean, I had no plans of being in electronic payments. I got here by accident. A lot of other people did. But you also mentioned your first job was with the ICBA, and that's who you're with now. Can you help us? I mean, what's ICBA stand for? What is even the purpose of the ICBA? Because there's so many agencies out there, it's easy to get them confused. And I think everybody should know who you are and what the ICBA is doing.
Yeah, ICBA is Independent Community Bankers of America. We were founded in Minnesota over 90 years ago. It was 1930, and 28 bankers came together. They all put, $25 in a hat, and at the time they were focused on interstate branching. So there's lots of associations. People, again, Constitution, we're allowed to assemble and petition. So trade associations exist when people want to assemble and petition and come together to have more power. So or more voice. So in supporting, ICBA, we've got offices in Sauk Center, Minnesota, offices in DC. We also have an office in Atlanta, and then not to mention we've got a lot of remote employees that are just positioned every which way to reach out to our members to help them get done what they need to get done and make it fair and easy for them. So we focus on national issues. There are also associations that focus on their regional and state issues. So we're focused on national and federal issues.
So is that what makes the ICBA different from other associations, that you're national focus rather than regional focus, or is it
Um,
something else that
I would say that,
differentiates?
yeah, because you're going to also have state associations. There are also other national banking associations. What I think makes ICBA special is the people, because we're exclusively focused to community banks. There might be other financial institutions that support different flavors of financial institutions, different types. But because community banks are institutions that take deposits in locally and lend out money locally, we're focused exclusively on community banks. And what's also nice about ICBA is our people. I mean, it sounds cheesy to say that, but everyone talks about their people. But ICBA is led by Rebecca Romero Rainey. She's actually a third generation banker. So when you're being led by someone who's a banker, the belief and the understanding as to what we can do to help banks, help community banks is strong. And even we continue to make sure that when we hire people who have banking experience and community experience, even if it's stories like the one I was kind of telling, that you have a passion for this. We've hired a lot of people at ICBA who have passions for it, have very unique backgrounds. Most recently, we hired Peter Nelson, who is with member engagement, and he
Mhm.
was most recently president of Glenwood State Bank, which is in Minnesota. And interestingly enough, his home is like on the other side of the lake where that very first ICBA meeting was held. So
No way.
yeah, it's just, I don't want to say we're family, but we're believers in what we work for. We don't just come to work and it's our job. It's really, when the leadership is in the industry, which is something that you represent, it just makes a difference. So and it permeates from like all of our staff. So yeah, from the top to yeah.
Well, see, and I have to agree with that. Your people are amazing, because I can think of like Brian Levendur and Scott Ancient, both friends of mine, both guys I've known for a long time. And I love seeing the work that they do. Now, I know one of the things that you do has to do a lot with community banks. And I think one of the things that people don't understand is, why are community banks so important? I think that gets overlooked a lot of times. So why is it that the ICBA is there working with community banks? Why do we need community banks?
Well, we need all financial institutions. The big corporations are important to lend to the big bank, or the big banks need to lend to the big corporations. Community banks lend locally. So, they take in their deposits and they reinvest them locally, and their loans go out locally. So when you're looking at, let's say, small business loans, community banks make 60% of all small business loans and 80% of all agricultural loans. So, but community banks only hold about 25% of banking industry assets. So we definitely overpunch in small business and ag loans, which you hear so many times about how important agricultural loans and small business loans are for generating the economy, keeping things moving. Because then if you can make the small business loans, they do hiring, so it reinvests locally. So it's very important for that reason.
Okay, that's cool. Now, I also know this because I mean, community is in the word there, so they're a big part of the community. But I also know that they face a lot of unique challenges, and that you're there to help them through those challenges. What are the things that ICBA does to be able to help aid community banks to be successful?
Um, we like to divide things up into maybe three pillars that we'll talk about: our advocacy, our education, and our innovation. And knowing that you've got different channels or pillars of what we're providing support for those different challenges for. So the advocacy is my side. So, and specifically, I'm in the regulatory burden area or regulatory area, and helping banks deal with the regulatory burden and making sure that we're advocating for less of it and that it's equal. Education is all the educational opportunities we provide, just to make sure you're staying on top of your staff is developed, that they're getting new opportunities, that they're staying current on any changes in information that's coming out. And innovation, that's kind of our products and services. So some we'll gather banks together, so have group purchasing power, so you can get a better deal on something. And even when we're talking about innovation, we have our think tech, which is located out of Atlanta. I know you're familiar with it, and that's where we review new products and services that are coming out, look at fintechs. It's the think tech is currently in its ninth innovation, and that's kind of our incubator. So it's where we're helping businesses who think that they have a product and service that community banks can use to make things more efficient. We work with them so they can get in front of regulators to find out, like, oh, this is how we're going to be regulated if we get into this space. And we get them in front of other bankers, community bankers, so they can be like, all right, yeah, like, I get your product, what you're selling. This is how you can help us make it fit better. And same thing when we talk about fit better, if you've got a product, it needs to integrate with the other technology that's already at the community bank. So making sure that these new products and services integrate into the cores that the banks already have, because banking is a very complex, a lot of things touching each other. So that helps our community banks then can get products and services that are new and fit for their banks. And then I feel bad that I didn't talk about ICBA payments because you were talking about solutions. ICBA payments has been around for 40 years. It was actually, when it first started in the 80s, was one of the first times to have one of these models where we were gathering banks together on their card portfolios to deal with the larger networks to kind of have group purchasing power. And it honestly has always been changing and innovating. And there's going to be some new announcements soon about some of the new changes that are happening at ICBA payments to make sure that the products and services we're offering, that the banks are then offering to their customers, is staying top and current, and it's efficient, and it's profitable for everybody along the chain, that the banks can do this and the customers can have an affordable product. So I'm very excited about some of the changes we're going to be having at ICBA payments.
Well, and I can tell your excitement. I mean, I'm sitting here overwhelmed. I mean, from talking about the Think Tech Accelerator program. Yes, big fan. Love what that's doing for the industry overall. And then you tease us with some new innovations and products that are coming out from the payment side of things. But can we go back to the advocacy and policy work? Because I know that's something, like you said, you do some of that work and that you're really big in representing community banks in. What are some of the issues that ICBA is currently looking at or currently addressing? Because I mean, there's a lot happening in the industry. So I'm curious, what's your focus on there?
Yeah, there is definitely a lot happening. Our main theme that we're putting on, in the start of 2025 is repair, reform, and thrive. This is where we're, helping Congress and federal regulators understand the industry and some of our concerns. So we're talking about, what kind of rules need to be repaired, what kind of regulations need reform. And if we get this repair and reform, we're then going to be able to thrive, because as I was talking before, community banks are so key to many of our local communities and key to the small business, and it just will help us thrive. One of the standing advocacy points we've always had is if you're doing equal regulation for equal risk for equal products. So I guess I kind of said that backwards is, if you're doing the same thing, we should be having the same risk, or if you're doing the same thing, you have the same risk, and then you have the same regulations. That we shouldn't have one regulation for everybody, even if you're doing all different things, that your regulation should be proportional to the amount of risk that you're taking on. If you're taking on something that's riskier, you should have more regulation. If you're taking on something that's less risky, you should have less regulation. So it shouldn't be, a line of regulation and, your risk is going like this. So,
Yeah, it should be
and even if you're
proportional.
not a bank and you're doing something that banks do, you should have that same regulation because it protects the customers, it protects the economy. So we want an equal playing field for everybody. So
Okay.
you're actually asking some of the things we've done, and there is so much going on this year too, in just these last couple of months. But I think one of the big things we've had is even when we started off this year, when Congress first opened, the House Financial Services Committee first hearing this year was about community banking. And Rebecca testified for 4 hours about tiered regulation. She was talking about repair and reform and thrive. And then the same time while she was on testifying, we also had Alice Frazier, she's the ICBA's chairman elect, so she'll be like our chairman next year. Her day job is the president and CEO for the Bank of Charleston, which is in West Virginia. She was testifying on the Small Business Committee hearing. So we had, like, the first day hearings were going, we had two bankers testifying and just helping to set the playing field as to talking about what community banking issues are, how we feel about them, and how it affects community banks, and then how that affects the economy and small businesses.
Okay, cool. Because one of the questions that comes up is, if you're doing this advocacy, you're doing this policy, how is it you actually work with the industry, work with the lawmakers? And I guess one way is you do the testifying to be able to present the information. Are there other things that the ICBA does to be able to promote this with the lawmakers, with Congress, Senate, even the president?
Um, yes, we have lobbyists, registered lobbyists, where their job is going up on the Hill, and they are some of the hardest working folks out there. And we've got some great lobbyists. But it's also our engagement with the members. So helping bankers tell their stories to the members in the House and the Senate, and helping the bankers tell their stories in the community. Because keep in mind, your members of Congress, yes, they're in DC, but they fly back home. So they need to know who you are and what your stories are and how it affects it. So, and our lobbyists help make the connection. So, you end up with Alice Frazier, who's able to testify to talk about the importance of community banks and their small business lending. And, it's her relationships. It's us helping her meet the right members of Congress and senators to get her stories out there. And then behind the scenes, when people ask questions, we're able to answer them and send them to the right people. After laws are passed, on Congress, my job comes in later. That is, there's a book. Actually, it's not really a book anymore. But every day there is, the Federal Register publishes if there's going to be new rules that are going to be changed, or if they have rules in the way they write them. And so this is when the regulators start to finalize the details of the rules. So this is where my job comes in. I work with the ICBA committees, who are volunteer bankers, and I go through the questions, and I propose to the bankers, like, hey, these are the rules that are changing. These are some of my questions. And I research the wonky stuff and write some of the comments, but I work with our bankers so they can say, hey, this is how it's going to affect us.
Wait, can I
And
ask one thing about that? That is something that's public knowledge that you're going through, right? It's because I know a lot of listeners sometimes will sit there and say, only the people in the industry get access to that. It's
well,
restricted. It should be available to everybody, but that is available to everybody.
it is, and you can research past comment letters too. So when you write that comment letter, it is public. You can pull it up on the website when they propose those rules. Those are public, and yeah, it's you just submit online too when you've got and it's part of the public record. So yes, and that's how we help steer the regulators. And what's actually really cool about that too is you can see the impact that we make. There was when the regulators publish the final rule, what they have to do is they have to give a summary of the comments to be like, hey, we proposed this rule, and these were the comments that we received, and then they'll go through it in nuances. And there was something recently where they didn't move forward with the rule, and they were talking about one of the different reasons that they didn't go forward with this rule. And what they had said is that only one comment letter brought up this particular risk. And they don't name names. You could go back and research it, but I knew it was my letter, and so I was quite excited to see that this regulator called
You had
out.
an impact.
It had an impact, and it had an impact. I feel like it was for my banks too that we had this, and we talked about this, and so I knew then that the regulators read our letter. It stuck with them, that it then made it into the summary, and this proposed rule didn't go forward. And I was just so happy about that because, yeah, I've been here 2 years, and sometimes it takes 2 years for that whole cycle to happen, from the proposal to the letter to the final rule. So it was just neat to see the impact of a rule not going forward that we had, and to be like, I helped that happen. So yeah.
That is cool. Now, something else though, I know the ICBA does, because you had ICBA, they call it ICBA Live. You have community events, and you have events where people can come to. And I'm a big fan of getting in person with people and doing those types of events. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's available there?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Live. Live just wrapped up. That was our annual convention. The next event that's coming up is in May, which is ICBA's Capital Summit. This is when we have the community bankers fly into DC to make sure their voices are being heard on Capitol Hill. So it's, again, the opportunity for the community bankers to tell their stories about reform, repair, and thrive. So we do a little bit of lobbying training, talk about, this is how you tell your story to the members of Congress. We'll have different people from Congress come and speak, or from the regulators come and speak, so they can be updated as to what's going on at different agencies, and hear from different leaders of different banking agencies or committees on Congress. So, but again, it's the ability to petition your government. It's the ability to gather together. So, yes, if the members who write the laws, either the big laws or how they put the rules together, don't hear the stories and don't understand how it affects the community banks, it's getting your voice heard. And so, yeah, we want to help our members tell their story. So
I think that's important. I mean, the work you're doing is incredible. And I know you've been doing, you said for 90 years, ICBA has been around.
yeah.
I think the big question is, what's the future of ICBA look like? What do you see happening in the future? What new initiatives, what things are taking place that are going to help the future of ICBA and community banking overall?
I like to lean in on buying local. Like you hear so much about how people want to buy local, and I really think as we're hearing the movement from so many different people, buying local on whether it's farmers markets or something, I think that people are going to organically see the value of community banks. And I think it's just going to be a natural extension into banking. So I think that community banks are going to continue to be around, because consumers are going to want community banks, whether they're small business owners or whether they're just retail customers. And, even as community banks grow in size, because, we have inflation. So if you have like a random cutoff, community banks you want your bank to grow. So they're going to, grow past these random cutoffs, and we'll have to change the regulations to it. I'm also hopeful that as we see more movies, I used to always, when people ask me what a community bank was, you used to have to quote back to It's a Wonderful Life. You're like, okay, this is how it worked. We've gotten some buzz lately about a movie on Netflix called Bank of Dave. And so I'm hoping that will continue to educate people about what community banks are and the value of lending local. It's a British movie, but the theme of it transfers over to the U.S. about lending
What
local.
was the name of that again?
Bank of Dave. Have you not seen it?
I have not. Bank of Days. It's going on my list.
Oh yeah, you should definitely go on your list. Yeah, and we'll talk about because again in banking and finance, whenever you go to like an AML BSA conference, you always kick off the conference like, hey, what's your favorite BSA movie? and then you'll give your samples like, okay, in this movie, this is what they were doing wrong, or this is how they got caught. Yeah, Bank of Dave. Yeah, so we'll do that podcast another time as we go through banking movies.
We might have to do a review of it because Catch Me If You Can was the only one I could get people to even come close to relating to, and then I'm like, but I really don't deal with checks anymore.
Yeah, no, Bank of Dave. Yeah, and it's more about lending and small business lending, and there's going to be a sequel coming out soon. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I got it on my list. Now, one more thing. You've really enlightened us a lot on what ICBA is, what you're doing, and what's out there. And I also, when I asked you how you got in this industry, you mentioned a lot of things you've done. And what I think is wonderful is you've had an incredible career. And a lot of people that listen to the Payments Podium, they are people that are coming into this industry or looking to advance themselves in this industry. So I'd like to ask, what advice would you give them? Like, what would you tell them? This is what I did to become successful in this industry, or this is what you should be focused on if you want to be successful in this industry. So what would be your advice to those people?
I really believe in putting in your time. It takes a lot of time to learn, and sometimes you think you're just going to learn a book or take something, and then it's going to give you the next step. There's a lot of value, I think, to just putting your time in and becoming an expert at just a lower level. There's been stages in my career where I didn't have the bandwidth to advance because I just had other demands on my time as I was doing, my work-life balance. I wasn't pushing myself or leaning in or what have you. So, but then just by being able to be the best and at the level that you were going to be staying at, when you're ready for that next step, you've built up enough that you're able to grow. So don't feel bad when you don't feel like you're getting a promotion every year. If you're working at that one level, you're building up stuff that's going to help you later. And you just keep up with your education and become an expert in your area, because it all transfers over. I think I told you a story that, I've been in multiple payment rails. They're all kind of similar. We've got senders and receivers and models. So yeah, what you learn stays with you.
I couldn't agree more. I love it. You put in the time, learn what you can. I love how you snuck in a little work-life balance is important there too, because it definitely is. But Kari, I want to thank you for being on the Payments Podium today and enlightening everybody on the ICBA, Independent Community Bankers of America, and what they're doing. And for those of you listening, watching right now, if there's a subject or a speaker that you think needs to be on the Payments Podium, all you got to do is get in contact with me, Kevin@paymentsprofessor.com. I will do all I can to make sure that we get that speaker or we get that topic addressed. But for now, this is the part where I say, class dismissed.
There's a world out there, it's a digital maze where dollars move in mysterious ways. Complex systems, rules, and regulations. The Payments Professor sparks revelations. No